When I was a kid, a grown-up was constantly complaining about them, about they doing this and that, they doing this and that. And I was wondering, who does he have in mind with this they? Because it seems something very concrete and very clear to him. But when you then raise the question, wait a minute, what do you mean? Who are they? He couldn't really give an answer. And yet it was something that was determining his emotional state to a very high degree. He spent most of the time complaining about them, yet not having a clear picture who they are, and yet feeling that he knows them, that they are there, and that they make his life miserable with their political decisions or whatever else. And this made me wonder, why is it that we understand what we mean when we say they? It's immediately obvious to everyone. And it's one of those foundational terms that we just immediately grok, no matter the cultural context. And there are even trends where people complain about them. Even most political exchanges today, in most political polarization, is based on the assumption that there is them and us. So we and them. We understand both terms, and yet when you get closer and ask, well, what do you mean by we? And what do you mean by them? And who are they? Usually people can't really give an answer. It's extremely vague. The people that they assume are part of the them can easily be shown to be not necessarily connected to any kind of group identity, because the signs that we take as proving the point that they are part of the group are usually highly interpreted, right? You have just few bits and pieces that you could, if you make 5 turns, interpret as a sign for, them belonging to a specific group identity. But on the face of it, there are many different interpretations which are equally possible and equally valid, where a single statement does not prove that someone is part of a conspiratorial group. But the interesting part for me still is, why do we understand the term them or they, just as we understand, this is a point that Wilber has been making, the basic pronouns that we're using. Everybody gets them, no matter your cultural and the historical context. You understand what you mean by I, you understand what you mean by you understand what you mean by it, you understand what you mean by we, them, and you. These are so foundational human experiences or human categories through which we experience reality that you can assume that everybody is capable of them from a certain age on. And the trouble with these categories is that the moment you start questioning whether someone belongs to that group or not, in most cases, it ends up very dubious. In most cases, we can't really make the point that someone is participating and part of a we. This is another experience that I've often had with students, where whenever you claim a group identity, the point was made that the people that supposedly are part of a group don't really share that much in common. They have different individual beliefs, they have different individual lives and histories, they have different traumas. So speaking of a we, just as speaking of a them, oftentimes by students, and this was the dominating position in the humanities department, I believe, was that whenever you say them or whenever you say we, you're actually following up on an intuition, on a prejudice, but there are no such things as we or them. There are no such things as group identities and we spaces. This is nothing but a prejudice, because at the end of the day, again, you can't really show, look, if person A and person B share these and these and these and these characteristics, they are part of a we space. You can never really make that point without exposing yourself to the question, well, wait a minute, why does this make them a we and something else not? And this is obviously not right, because what we can see is that the same thing goes with sharing ideas. For me, understanding you, it's not crucial that the idea that you have in your mind matches the idea that then gets into my mind one to one, molecule to the molecule. This is not what we mean when we say that we understand someone. We don't mean that our ideas match physically, that they literally overlap and are identical, have the same features, have the same weight and the same size. This is not what we mean when we say we understand each other. And yet we understand that, or we assume that understanding is there. And the most obvious point is when you say, look, let's meet at 5 o'clock, and both parties understand exactly, not just relatively well, but both parties understand with precision what is being said here when we say that we are going to meet each other at 5 o'clock. Yet the reality of it is that I won't be there at 5, and the other person won't be there at 5 either. I might be 5 seconds past 5 there. They might be 5 milliseconds past 5 there. We'll never meet with exact precision, and yet this is not what the mental realm is about. And yet we know we can precisely understand somebody, even though the features of how I represent 5 o'clock might be very different from the features how somebody else represents 5 o'clock. And the same thing goes with us and them. For a we space to exist, it doesn't presuppose that our physical or mental features overlap and that we share one-to-one the same characteristics. But for we space to be there, the assumption is that we have to believe that we are part of a group. In other words, what other people call prejudice, this idea that we are part of the group, because supposedly we never can share the same characteristics. Like the traditional ways of describing a we, by using, for example, race and identity and history, have all been proven to be wrong. You can't use any of these terms to prove that you are identical to somebody else to the group. And it is indeed true that everybody else in the group will be significantly different from you. But this is misreading the phenomenon itself. Because at the end of the day, we spaces exist, but they are not based on shared characteristics, but they are based on shared beliefs. And shared beliefs are possible. You can have a group of people who believe they are part of the same group, even though the beliefs themselves are false. So you can then ask the questions, why do you believe that you share something with somebody else, or why do you believe somebody else is part of the group? And all of the characteristics that they come up with might be wrong. They might come up with, I don't know, ideas about genetics. They might come with ideas about heredity, whatever kind of nonsense. It doesn't matter. But what matters is that they both share the belief that they are part of the same group. And this makes them part of the same group. And this is really weird, because nothing like that is similar in the physical realm. And it is a very weird way of making reality, because here beliefs really are constitutive reality. By believing something, you make it real, which is really odd when you look from the scientific perspective. Beliefs are not primary. This is not what we are about, but what we want to gain and achieve is beliefs that are valid, that actually can be pointed out to be reasonable in a given context. In social reality, this doesn't seem to be the first thing that is important. And however, whenever we perceive reality, it seems that social reality, or looking at the world as something that is a social reality, is a foundational way of us experiencing the world in general. The moment you understand the term they, you already understand what it means that there is a group of people, whatever constitutes their identity, who are in some way unified. You understand that, and you project that, on the other hand, of course, also into the world. You project a they into the world into many places where no they exists at all. Like the guy that I, in the beginning was speaking about, he was constantly assuming a they where it was obvious that these people had nothing in common. He didn't even know the people who supposedly are part of the they. And it was obviously a projection on his part. Which served a certain psychological function, I guess, for self-regulation, blaming somebody else for your own misdoings, or for your own inability to act in a certain situation, and your own lack of agency in a certain situation. And this is something we have to be very careful about, because by virtue of us looking at the world as something that is composed of I, we, its, and thems, it does not mean that these categories are applicable in each and every situation. And I believe many of the most foundational human conflicts that we have basically arise from us overemphasizing these basic categories and insisting that there is a they or there is a them in a given situation without really looking at the situation and asking the question, well, is this a valid category to use in a given context? Or am I oversimplifying reality here in making it cohere with my own expectations and bending reality to my own expectations and thus breaking it, and more worse, actually breaking human relationships, because this is what we do when we overuse these basic foundational categories, and they feel intuitive. All of those categories feel like they give us the feeling of being in touch with reality. They're so basic and so foundational that they feel alive. When we say they, we don't feel like this is a construct, that this is just something that we think of or think into existence. We take the they to be something very real. And real things are things that you're afraid of, things that can excite you. The same thing with we, when we believe that we're part of a we space. This we is extremely real and concrete to us. It is as real as an animal that could devour you. The we is something that you can be terrorized by, and something that you can be absolutely excited by, something that you will want to devote your life to and give your life for. And this is weird stuff, but this is how human beings are. And overdoing it, and particularly not stepping back and taking the philosophical perspective and asking the question, well, is it adequate in a given situation to speak about them? Or is it adequate to speak about we? Like, what does make us we? When we are incapable of taking this philosophical reflection and stepping back, I think we're mostly acting out these impulses. And they are, in most present-day contexts, just not extremely fruitful and constructive. Quite on the opposite. They feel very real, and people feel really that they're giving their lives for something meaningful, while at the end of the day, they're giving their lives for something that's very ancient and something basic that has functions within certain contexts, but not within present-day society's challenges, where I believe you have so many layers of we and them. We are on so many layers. For example, do we share a we space with other people while not sharing a we space with them in other regards? This is something that's happening to us all the time. If I look at how many people I've interacted with in really constructive and meaningful ways, it's innumerable. The people I've learned from are not hundreds, they're thousands. If you compare that to a life of an average person just a few hundred years ago, or even 100 years ago, the major people who influenced your life were oftentimes less than a dozen. The people that you learn from, the people that inspire you, the people that you've taken your worldview from, were often less than 100 in total. And nowadays it's up in the thousands. So many people you interact with, and they are kind of all space, a part of a we space, but in a very different way from them being part of your culture, and in a very different way from them being part of a closed community of people who fight for something and fight together for survival. This is an entirely different context, and we are a social experiment. The past 100 years have had more social changes than is actually conceivable, and the human mind has been put in such a new context of living that it's very challenging and very actually I'm very curious to see what will happen and whether we actually are capable of living in these new in these new environments, still applying these old categories of I, we, it, and them all the time, and feeling like these are the most foundational ways of how we experience reality in the first place. We are constantly looking for a we, we're constantly looking for an it, a you, and a they, and this is not helpful in most present-day challenges and most present-day situations.